So there are many questions around technology. So I feel, Sanjay, this is, of course, your area of expertise in particular, but they are also related to the, to how technology can enhance, platforms that are underpinning, or there can be foundational work to gender equality or to gender-related issues. So there are two. I will encourage you, Sanjay, to choose among them. So from our partners, so we talked about female genital cutting and the importance of course, the law, but the law not being sufficient in some of these countries for the practice to be abandoned. So the question comes from the Orchid Project, our long-term partners in this area. So which role does technology play, Sanjay, if any, in thinking about systemic and exponential change? So which role does technology play, if any, in thinking about systemic and exponential change? And there is another one very interesting about the use of platforms. I guess this is also related to technology-based platforms, but also maybe interesting for you, Sybil. Are there any platforms being used for addressing gender-related issues? How do you see the use of platform for this purpose? So maybe first over to you, Sanjay, on the technology one, or even on the platform, of course.
Yes, of course. I think both are very important questions. Firstly, let me just zoom out and take a broader view of technology. If you go back in the history of civilization and how we have evolved over the last many centuries, every massive transition, technology has played a good role and a very important role. And sometimes even a very tough role, if you will, because all the transitions that we have seen today, when we use the word technology, our mind immediately gravitates towards information technology. But technology has seen, how humans change the way they use matter or by using technology. Then they changed how they move energy using technology. And now we are in an era where we are changing how we move information using technology. And so technology is a bigger question, and technology's role in transition of our societies is unquestionable over centuries in the past. Where we are today, I think one of the biggest role that technology plays is what we call as making scarce resources abundant. And I think it's a very important facet in large-scale systems change as a precursor to creating public goods. What is scarce when we try to drive understanding of context is scarce, knowledge is scarce, expertise is scarce. People who actually know how to respond to a complex situation, getting resources to them is scarce. And technology plays the role of that connective tissue. It is not the answer, it's an enabler. And when we look at technology, I would urge you to look for three important dualities that we need to hold in our mind. And whether it is information technology or whether it is any other form of technology to move matter or energy, it's important to see that we hold three dualities in our mind. One duality is that the role of technology is to build something, build an infrastructure, build a capability, build capacity, build, it could be human capacity through learning, it could be infrastructural capacity to move things, but it has the role to build. But now increasingly, technology also has the role to repurpose things that have been around but can now be better used in the same system. Repurpose skills, repurpose people from ability to do A to do ability to do B. Repurpose physical infrastructure from what it can do in the previous context to what it can do in new context. So it's not only about build, it's build and repurpose. And any large scale system change would require us to build a few things and repurpose a few things. And technology has a very important role in building and repurposing. Second important duality is to enable and orchestrate. Technology plays a big role in enabling newer things to do, newer ways of solving things, newer kind of innovations, which could be how you treat a disease or how you learn about a disease. Both can use technology, right? how you actually plan for a certain, say, how do you optimize water usage in a certain village, to how do you actually orchestrate community decision around how do you really use that water and why it's a common pool resource and how should you retain it. So enabling and orchestrating are important two roles that technology plays. And the third very important one is empowering and nudging the system towards equity. And I think this is the one that is the least discussed role of technology. Mostly technology is seen as a mechanism to control the ecosystem, whereas the real power of technology is empowering the ecosystem, making people more and more capable of doing things, using data to inform the people about where they are and what can they do next, rather than understanding data of people and trying to control them. So the role of data, the role of technology in empowering the system is a very important role that technology plays today. And balancing that is how do you nudge the system towards equity, because technology improves our ability to see things, right? For example, today, if we launch a satellite into the space, we can actually not see it, even with a telescope for that matter. Maybe with a very high-powered one we can. But sitting in a room, we know everything that is happening there. What is the term used? Telemetry, right? Why can't we understand what is the status of our societal development? Where are the people suffering? Where is it that we need to help? Where are the areas where we need to pay more attention to, and use technology to understand more fine-grained differences and respond to those differences? And I think that's what I would certainly urge anybody who's thinking of technology. Firstly, take a wider view. It's not always only information technology. Second is, how do we hold these dualities? Build and repurpose, enable and orchestrate, empower and nudge the system towards equity. And I believe that technology has a massive role to play. And if you don't do this, then the same thing can become a problem. It can become a weapon, which does not necessarily lead to a happier situation, increases the divide, creates more kinds of challenges, because we miss the fundamental reason why we as a civilization came up with technology in the first place. So I would certainly say platforms, technology, very important role, but it behooves us to think about it with that lens and inspire others to think about it with that lens.
Thank you, Sanjay. Wow, you bring so much to this conversation, and it's inspiring to hear you talking and to imagine, to envision really the possibilities that can be unleashed with proper use of technology, and what is possible today with the platforms that we need to enhance together. So, Sybil, do you have something to add? Otherwise, there is another very interesting question who came through. And I also welcome contribution once again. It seems our audience is very shy today, but we absolutely want to hear from you, and your question has been amazing, and I'm sure we will try to condensate them or try to answer them in a format, of course in a future format, not today, we don't have the time, but thank you really for the quality of your contribution through your questions. So Sybil, do you have something to add to these questions, to these questions, sorry?
Yeah, so maybe I'll add a little bit to the technology and then answer the question on the platforms. I think technology has a really central and catalyzing role in the systems change that we envision for women and looking at women's empowerment. I mean, think of all the women in Africa who live in rural, remote locations. So digital presents the opportunity to really be able to access information, products, and services from their home. And then also highlighting, there are social norms that still exist that prevent them from being able to leave their home. So maybe they could be in urban areas, peri-urban areas, but still there's mobility challenges that they face. Given some of the social norms that exist that prevents them from leaving their household, which probably means they don't have a phone as well. But still, looking at digital as presenting a potential solution to empower women to pool information and knowledge, but also push In that push aspect, you know, you see a lot of social networks and cohesion happening between groups and between women across Africa whenever there's a crisis, whenever there's a flood or a drought. You know, they start spreading information. With COVID-19 as well, they're starting to spread information, sharing best practices, sharing the right messages around what the virus is, and how it's spread, hygiene that should be practiced. They're doing that through WhatsApp. They're doing that through you know, just digital channels. And at the same token, you know, before or even during, you know, such a natural disaster or crisis, they also share information by sharing YouTube videos. You know, how do they potentially you know, have more climate resistance fields based on some techniques that they have on the ground. So there's a lot of ways that women use technology in order to really help empower them, either by pulling information or pushing it out to others. I do think that technology also plays a role in being able to aggregate groups, be able to aggregate women, I should say, and be able to allow potential other actors to converge on the groups and provide additional products and services. You can imagine if there's a health worker who's working in a specific area, for her to go into a community and go door to door to speak about breastfeeding practices, it's going to take a long time, and she's not going to reach all the communities in her region. But if she's able to, you know, meet with a group and then disseminate some key information, maybe with a tablet that she has, making sure that she touches on all the points, digital allows for the quality and dissemination of information to be uniform, standardized in many ways. And then also, you can imagine aggregation of groups in order for the private sector to start converge and offer products and services through those groups instead of going one by one to each rural woman. And then I think technology plays a role in being able to access and collate better data. So being able to collect data rapidly so government can make decisions. I mean, you can imagine it now, again, with the COVID-19 situation, when the government in any given African country is trying to provide stimulus checks or payments to certain income levels of the population. Well, how are they going to do that if they don't have information on people? One quick way of getting that is through digital surveys, or having that digital backbone through a number of programs that they've implemented over the years, touching on their population. So I think technology has a role to play, especially if you think about it in a sort of an architecture that needs to be built out in order to inform various actors. On the platforms question, I think it was, you know, are there platforms that address gender-related issues? You know, I started out in this discussion, you know, throwing out this new term, women's empowerment collectives. Essentially, you know, women's empowerment collectives in Africa are savings groups, and in India they're SHGs. What we see at the foundation is beyond that initial, I mean, there are 5 core elements that are important for that women's empowerment piece. And so it's going beyond, you know, the ability for women to save, the ability for women to have that social cohesion, and really looking at how do you actually give the opportunity for women to have access to knowledge, life skills, training on a number of things, from health, agricultural, financial services. Another element is looking at the critical consciousness of gender. Great, you provide women access to knowledge, content, and information, but again, if she has mobility challenges, there's other social norms preventing her from actually being able to contribute to a conversation in the household on making the decision on who goes to school, then you know, she's essentially powerless. So looking at how do you then foster a critical look within the power holders, the gatekeepers, and the woman herself to really start changing gender and the way that she is able to express her agency. And then the last one is looking at access to markets and services. And really this is taking that piece of looking at, great, you maybe have savings that you can draw from, you have access to credit, you have new skills to expand your business or your agricultural productivity, but then what about linking it to buyers? What about the ability to access healthcare? Great, you have new information on preventative care that you should be seeking. But what about actually accessing healthcare? So looking at the comprehensiveness of those elements being layered onto a group of women will enable her to further along and advance towards really becoming empowered. So it's not just one thing of just giving her credit or giving her the ability to access financial services. It's also working on those other dimensions that impact her life and her household. So these collectives, in essence, are platforms to which you can start driving certain programs, services, and definitely ideas and change that can happen for women in any location, honestly, rural or urban.